Sometimes the best things in life come to us when we're both broken and ready to heal. That's exactly what happened when old Sheriff Amos Keene paid $10 for a dying German shepherd in the frontier town of Whetstone Creek. Folks laughed at him, said he wasted his money on a dog that couldn't even stand. But Amos saw something in those fading eyes that reminded him of himself. The dog he named Dusty started doing strange things, finding hidden secrets leading him to lost children and sitting by graves Amos hadn't visited in years. What could this dying dog possibly know about the regrets that haunted an old lawman's heart? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun crept over Whetstone Creek like an old friend who'd learned to take his time. Amos Keene sat on the porch of his weathered clapboard house, a steaming cup of coffee cradled in hands that had seen 68 years of hard living. The steam rose in lazy curls, mixing with the cool Montana air of early September 1892. His fingers, gnarled as old oak roots, bore the marks of 4 decades wearing a sheriff's badge, scars from knives, rope burns from wrestling cattle thieves, and the permanent calluses from countless hours gripping his Colt revolver. The town stretched out before him in the golden light, a collection of false-fronted buildings that had seen better days. Whetstone Creek wasn't dying exactly, just fading slow and dignified, like an old photograph left too long in the sun. The railroad had passed them by 15 years ago, choosing a route 20 miles south, and with it went the town's future. Now maybe 300 souls called this place home, down from near 1,000 in the boom days. Amos took a slow sip of his coffee, bitter and strong, just like he preferred. His knees ached something fierce this morning. They always did when the weather was fixing to change. Doc Holloway said it was arthritis, natural for a man his age who'd spent so many years in the saddle. The doc's words came back to him. "You're not young anymore, Amos. Time to let younger men do the running and jumping," but Amos had never been one for sitting idle. Even retired these past 3 years, he found himself walking the main street each morning, his eyes automatically scanning for trouble that rarely came anymore. Old habits die hard, his late wife Sarah used to say, especially when they've kept you alive this long. The screen door creaked behind him, a sound he'd been meaning to fix for months now, and he glanced at the empty chair beside him. Sarah's chair. 10 years she'd been gone, and still he couldn't bring himself to move it. Sometimes, in the early morning light, he could almost see her there, knitting in her lap, humming those old hymns she loved. They'd never had children. Lord knows they'd tried, but it wasn't meant to be. Sarah said maybe it was for the best, what with him being sheriff and all the danger that came with it, but Amos had always wondered what it might have been like to have a son or daughter, someone to pass his name to, someone to remember him when he was gone. He finished his coffee and stood, bones protesting the movement. The day wouldn't wait for an old man's aches and pains. He grabbed his hat, the same brown Stetson he'd worn for 20 years, and started his daily walk into town. Main Street was quiet at this hour. May's diner wouldn't open for another 30 minutes, but May herself was already inside. He could see her shadow moving behind the gingham curtains. The general store, the bank, the barber shop, all still shuttered against the morning chill. Only the livery stable showed signs of life, young Tommy Henderson already mucking out stalls. "Morning, Sheriff," Tommy called out, using the title folks still gave Amos, even though Deputy Caleb wore the badge now. "Morning, son," Amos replied, tipping his hat. The boy couldn't be more than 16, all eager energy and quick smiles. Reminded Amos of himself, back when the world still seemed full of possibilities. He continued his circuit past the church where Pastor Elijah would be preparing Sunday's sermon, past the modest courthouse where he'd testified in more trials than he could count, past the cemetery on the edge of town where Sarah rested beneath a simple granite stone. The sound of wagon wheels on hard-packed dirt drew his attention. A stranger was coming into town, sitting hunched on the bench of a rickety wagon pulled by a sway-backed mule. The man looked like he'd been rode hard and put up wet. Clothes, dusty from travel, face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. But it wasn't the man that caught Amos's eye. It was what lay in the back of the wagon, a dog. Even from a distance, Amos could tell the animal was in bad shape. It lay motionless on a dirty blanket, ribs showing through mangy fur, barely breathing from what he could see. A German shepherd, once probably magnificent, now reduced to skin and bones. The wagon pulled up in front of the general store, and the stranger climbed down with a groan. Up close, he smelled of whiskey and desperation, a combination Amos knew all too well from his years dealing with drifters. "Help you with something?" Amos asked, his voice carrying the authority of a man used to getting answers. The stranger sized him up with bloodshot eyes. "Just passing through. Thought I might sell some goods, make a few dollars before moving on." "What kind of goods?" The man jerked his thumb toward the wagon bed. "Got a dog there. Fine animal, just a bit under the weather. Make someone a good companion. They've got the patience to nurse him back." Amos moved closer, peering into the wagon. The dog's eyes were half closed, tongue lolling out, chest barely rising with each shallow breath. Those eyes, though, even dulled with sickness, they held something Amos recognized. A weariness, a resignation, the look of a creature that had given up hope. "That dog's dying," Amos said flatly. The stranger shrugged. "Maybe, maybe not. Either way, I can't feed him no more. You interested or not?" "Why would I want a dying dog?" "Same reason anyone buys anything, because you can afford to, and maybe, just maybe, you're fool enough to hope." The stranger's laugh was bitter. $10 and he's yours. Otherwise, I leave him by the side of the road next town over." Something stirred in Amos's chest, something he hadn't felt in years. Maybe it was the way the dog's eyes reminded him of his own reflection lately, tired, used up, waiting for the end. Maybe it was pure foolishness, as the stranger suggested, but Sarah's voice echoed in his memory. "You always did have a soft spot for broken things, Amos Keene." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet, extracting a $10 bill, money he'd been saving for a new winter coat. "You're making a mistake, old-timer," the stranger said, snatching the bill. "Dog's too far gone." "Then I guess we'll be too far gone together," Amos replied. The stranger helped him lift the dog from the wagon. Lord, the poor creature weighed hardly anything, and Amos cradled the animal in his arms. The dog's head lolled against his chest, and he felt the faint flutter of a heartbeat. "What's his name?" Amos asked. The stranger was already climbing back onto his wagon. "Never gave him one. Names are for things worth keeping." As the wagon rattled away, Amos stood in the middle of Main Street, holding a dying dog in his arms. May had come out of the diner, wiping her hands on her apron, her round face creased with concern. "Amos Keene, what in heaven's name?" "Got myself a dog, May." "That's not a dog, that's a bag of bones with fur." But her eyes were soft. May had known him 30 years, knew he couldn't turn away from suffering. Doc Holloway emerged from his office across the street, medical bag already in hand. The doc was Amos's age, maybe a year or two younger, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "Let's get him inside, Amos. We'll see what can be done." They carried the dog to Doc's office, laying him on an examination table. The animal didn't protest, didn't even whimper. Just lay there, those brown eyes watching Amos with what seemed like curiosity. "Severe malnutrition," Doc pronounced after a thorough examination. "Dehydration. Looks like he's been running on empty for weeks. Surprised he's lasted this long. Can you help him?" Doc pulled off his spectacles, cleaning them with a handkerchief. "Amos, I'm a people doctor, not a veterinarian, but..." He held up a hand as Amos started to protest. "I learned enough farm medicine over the years. I can try. No promises, though. That's all I'm asking." They worked through the morning, Doc administering fluids, checking for injuries, mixing up a thin gruel the dog might be able to keep down. Amos stayed the whole time, one hand resting on the dog's head, stroking the matted fur. "What are you going to call him?" Doc asked. Amos looked at the dog, at the dust and grime coating his fur. Dusty. Seems fitting. Dusty it is then. Doc straightened up, wiping his hands. Best thing now is rest and regular feeding. Small amounts at first. Don't want to overwhelm his system. You prepared for this, Amos? Could take weeks, and there's no guarantee. I've got nothing but time, Doc. They fashioned a travois using a blanket and some poles, and Amos pulled Dusty home through the midday heat. Folks stopped to stare. Old. Sheriff Keene had finally lost his marbles, dragging a dead dog through town, but Amos paid them no mind. Back home, he made a bed for Dusty in the corner of the kitchen, using Sarah's old quilts. The dog settled into them with what might have been a sigh of relief. Amos sat beside him for a long while, just watching the rise and fall of that bony chest. You and me, he said quietly, we're both running on borrowed time. But maybe we can keep each other company for whatever days we've got left. Dusty's eyes opened, focusing on Amos with surprising clarity. For just a moment, Amos could have sworn he saw understanding there, maybe even gratitude, as the sun set that first evening. Painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Amos fed Dusty small spoonfuls of broth. The dog took them slowly, carefully, as if remembering what it was to be cared for. And Amos felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of the loneliness that had gripped him since Sarah died. He didn't know it then, but that $10 bill had bought him more than a dying dog. It had bought him a mystery that would unravel the very fabric of his quiet life, revealing secrets buried deeper than the town cemetery, and truths that would change everything he thought he knew about his past. But for now, in the soft light of evening, an old sheriff and a broken dog simply sat together, two souls who'd found each other at the edge of giving up, and somewhere in the gathering darkness, something ancient and knowing watched over them both, waiting for the right moment to reveal why their paths had crossed in the dusty street of a fading frontier town. The days that followed settled into a rhythm as old and comfortable as the town itself. Amos would wake before dawn, the habit of 40 years as a lawman impossible to break. He'd check on Dusty first thing, relieved each morning to find the dog still breathing, still holding on to life by the thinnest of threads. Deputy Caleb stopped by on the third day, his young face creased with concern. The boy, though at 26 Caleb was hardly a boy, had been Amos's protégé, learning everything he knew about keeping the peace in a town that rarely needed it anymore. Heard you bought yourself some company, Caleb said, removing his hat as he stepped into the kitchen. He was tall and lean, with honest brown eyes and a shock of dark hair that never quite stayed in place. Folks are saying you've gone soft in your old age. Folks say a lot of things, Amos replied, spooning broth into Dusty's mouth. Most of it worth about as much as yesterday's newspaper. Caleb knelt beside the dog, running a gentle hand over the matted fur. He's in rough shape. You sure about this, Amos?
Sure about what?
Giving a creature a chance to die with some dignity. Yeah, I'm sure about that. The younger man nodded, understanding in his eyes. Caleb had lost his own parents young, raised by an aunt who'd passed just last year. He knew something about loneliness, about the need for connection even when, especially when time was running out. Need any help? Caleb asked. Doc's been good about checking in. May brings food by. I'm managing. That's not what I meant. Caleb stood, settling his hat back on his head. You've been alone in this house too long, Amos. Since Sarah, well, it's good to see you caring about something again. After Caleb left, Amos sat in the quiet kitchen, listening to Dusty's labored breathing. The dog had managed to take more broth today, even lifted his head slightly when Amos approached. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. The afternoons found Amos and Dusty on the porch, the dog lying in the shade while Amos whittled or simply watched the town go about its business. Pastor Elijah would wave from across the street, his black coat and white collar a stark contrast in the afternoon sun. The pastor was a thin man, all sharp angles and nervous energy, relatively new to Whetstone Creek, only been here 5 years. May came by most evenings with supper, refusing to let Amos pay for it. You kept this town safe for 40 years, she'd say, her plump hands waving away his protests. Least I can do is make sure you don't starve. She'd linger sometimes, sitting in Sarah's old chair, talking about the day's happenings. May had never married, devoted her life to that diner and to mothering everyone in town who'd let her. Strange thing, she said one evening, watching Dusty sleep. That dog's stronger today than yesterday. Yesterday stronger than the day before. Doc says it shouldn't be possible, the shape he was in. Amos had noticed it too. Dusty was gaining weight, slowly but surely. His eyes were clearer, his breathing less labored. More than that, there was something about the way the dog looked at him, an intelligence that seemed almost human. By the end of the second week, Dusty could stand on his own. By the third week, he was walking, albeit shakily, around the house. And by the fourth week, something remarkable happened. Amos was cleaning out Sarah's old sewing room, something he'd been putting off for years, when Dusty limped in. The dog went straight to the closet, pawing at a particular floorboard with unusual insistence. "What is it, boy?" Amos asked, moving closer. Dusty whined, scratching harder at the board. Amos knelt, his knees protesting the movement, and examined the floorboard more carefully. There was something odd about it, a slight gap that shouldn't be there. Using his pocket knife, Amos pried up the board. Beneath it, wrapped in oilcloth, was a small bundle. His hands trembled as he unwrapped it, revealing a stack of letters tied with a faded ribbon. The top letter bore his name in handwriting he hadn't seen in over 40 years, Elizabeth Pritchard. The name hit him like a physical blow. His first love, the girl who'd left town suddenly in the spring of 1850, breaking his heart and leaving him to eventually find comfort in Sarah's patient arms. He'd spent years wondering what happened to Elizabeth, where she'd gone, why she'd left without a word. His fingers fumbled with the ribbon as Dusty sat beside him, perfectly still, watching with those knowing eyes. The first letter was dated just days after Elizabeth left. "My dearest Amos, by the time you read this, if you ever do, I will be far from Whetstone Creek, carrying a secret that would destroy us both if revealed. Please know that I loved you. I love you still. But circumstances have forced my hand, and I must protect what matters most. Forgive me. Always yours, Elizabeth. Protect what matters most." What did that mean? Amos's hands shook as he read through the other letters, each one more cryptic than the last, speaking of sacrifices made and futures secured. The last letter was dated months later from Helena. "Amos, I gave birth to our son 3 days ago. He has your eyes. I've made arrangements. He will have a good life, better than we could have given him, in the scandal that would have followed. The Thornton family has taken him. They promised to raise him as their own. I'm dying, my love. The fever has me, and I know I won't last the week. I hid these letters in our special place, hoping someday you might find them and know the truth. Our son lives. Find him. Tell him his mother loved him enough to let him go. Elizabeth." The paper fell from Amos's nerveless fingers. A son. He had a son. Not the childless life he'd believed, but a child, grown now, 42 years old, walking the earth somewhere, bearing his blood. Dusty nosed the letters, then walked to the window, staring out toward the old cemetery, where Elizabeth lay buried in an unmarked grave. Amos had paid for the stone himself years ago, though few knew it. How? Amos whispered to the dog. "How did you know where to look?" But Dusty just turned those ancient knowing eyes on him, and for the first time, Amos truly wondered if this dog was something more than he appeared, something sent to guide him, to reveal truths long buried. That night, Amos sat at his kitchen table, the letters spread before him, trying to make sense of a past that had suddenly been rewritten. The Thornton family. He knew of them, wealthy ranchers who'd made their fortune in cattle and land. But which of their children was his? And were they even still alive? Dusty lay at his feet, no longer the dying creature he'd been 4 weeks ago. The transformation was complete. The dog was healthy, strong, alert, as if he'd been waiting for this moment, for these letters to be found. "You brought me here for a reason, didn't you?" Amos said softly. "Elizabeth sent you somehow. I don't know how, don't know if I'm losing my mind even thinking such things, but you're here to help me find him. Our son. Dusty's tail thumped once against the floor. Outside, the night wind whispered through the eaves of the old house, carrying secrets and promises, endings and beginnings. Amos Keene, who thought his life was winding down to its quiet conclusion, suddenly found himself at the start of a journey that would test everything he believed about love, loyalty, and the mysteries that bind us to those we've lost. He reached down and stroked Dusty's head, feeling the warmth of life where death had so recently held sway. "All right then," he said. "Tomorrow we start looking. Wherever he is, whatever it takes, we'll find him." And Dusty, the $10 miracle, the impossible gift from beyond the grave, simply closed his eyes and slept the peaceful sleep of a purpose about to be fulfilled. The morning sun hadn't yet cleared the eastern peaks when Amos and Dusty set out. 3 weeks had passed since the discovery of Elizabeth's letters, 3 weeks of restless nights and questions that had no easy answers. The dog moved with surprising grace now, fully recovered from his brush with death, padding alongside Amos with the devotion of a creature who'd found his calling. They walked the familiar streets of Whetstone Creek, but everything looked different now. The church where Amos had married Sarah seemed to hold secrets in its shadows. The general store where he'd bought penny candy as a boy felt like a keeper of buried truths. Doc Holloway had been cautious when Amos showed him the letters the night before. "Elizabeth Pritchard," the old physician had murmured, adjusting his spectacles. "I remember her. Pretty girl, quiet, left town sudden-like." Now, as they walked, Amos felt that old heartbreak mixing with something new, a desperate need to find this son he'd never known. The Thornton family had been prominent in the territory, but their ranch lay 3 days' ride to the east. Dusty suddenly stopped, his ears pricking forward. They stood at the edge of town near the old Miller property, a place that had been abandoned for 20 years, ever since old Jeremiah Miller drank himself to death. The house was little more than a shell now, roof caved in, walls weathered to grey bones. "What is it, boy?" Amos asked. The dog pulled forward, straining against the rope leash. There was urgency in his movement, purpose. Against his better judgment, Amos followed. They picked their way through the overgrown yard. Dusty led him straight to what remained of the house, through a doorway that sagged on broken hinges. Inside, the floorboards were treacherous, rotted through in places. But Dusty moved with confidence. In what had been the main room, Dusty stopped and began to scratch at a particular floorboard. The action was identical to how he'd found Elizabeth's letters, deliberate, insistent. Amos knelt carefully, using his knife to pry at the board. It came up easily, as if it had been waiting all these years. Inside the hollow beneath was a small wooden box. Amos lifted it out, his heart hammering. A sharp tap with the knife handle broke the simple latch. Inside lay a photograph and a folded letter. The photograph stole his breath. It showed Elizabeth, younger than he remembered, standing beside a modest house. But it wasn't the house that made his hands shake. Elizabeth held 2 babies in her arms, twins. The letter beneath was in Elizabeth's familiar hand. "To whoever finds this, I pray it's Amos. The children in this photograph are my sons. Twin boys born March 15th, 1850. Their father is Amos Keene, though he knew nothing of their existence. I separated them at birth. One went to the Thornton family as planned. The other, I couldn't bear to part with both. My brother, Samuel Pritchard, took the second boy. He promised to raise him as his own, here in Whetstone Creek. I did this to protect them both. The Thorntons are wealthy. Samuel could provide love and a simple life. Neither family knew of the other child. If you're reading this, I am long dead. But my sons live, not knowing they are brothers, not knowing their true father walks among them. The inheritance I leave is substantial. Jeremiah Miller held my land in trust, mineral rights worth more than anyone knows. This box's location is detailed in documents with the Territorial Land Office in Helena. The inheritance is meant for both my sons, equally divided. Tell them I loved them. Elizabeth Pritchard, October 1850. Amos read it 3 times before its meaning sank in. Not one son, but 2. Twins. One with the wealthy Thorntons, the other raised right here under the Pritchard name. Samuel Pritchard had died years ago. But the man had raised a son, a boy he'd claimed was his sister's child from back east, Caleb, young Deputy Caleb Pritchard. The realization hit Amos hard. Caleb, the boy he'd trained, was actually his flesh and blood. His son. Sweet, merciful heaven, Amos breathed. Dusty whined, pressing against him, but there was more. The inheritance. Land with mineral rights. Worth more than anyone knows. Footsteps on the rotted porch made Amos look up sharply. A figure stood in the broken doorway. A tall man in an expensive suit. Sheriff Keene, the man said smoothly. I thought I might find you here. Silas Blackwood, the town's lawyer. A man who'd arrived about 10 years ago and slowly acquired most of the failing properties in town. He was maybe 50, with silver-streaked black hair and calculating eyes. Blackwood. Amos carefully folded the letter and tucked it inside his vest. Interesting place for a morning stroll. I could say the same. Blackwood's gaze fell to the box. The Miller property has been in legal limbo for years. I've recently acquired the deed. You're trespassing. Didn't see any posted signs. Consider yourself notified. Blackwood stepped closer. What's that you found there? Nothing that concerns you. Everything in this house concerns me. I own it now. Blackwood extended his hand. I'll need to examine any documents you've discovered on my property. Dusty's growl started low, building to a rumble that made Blackwood freeze. The dog positioned himself between Amos and the lawyer, teeth bared, hackles raised. Your dog seems agitated, Blackwood said, stepping back. Perhaps you should leash him properly. Perhaps you should state your business. They stared at each other, the air thick with tension. Finally, Blackwood smiled, a thin, humorless expression. I simply wanted to inform you of the property situation, and to express my interest in any historical documents relating to the Miller estate. If you come across anything I'd be willing to pay fair market value, I'll keep that in mind. Blackwood tipped his hat. Good day, Sheriff. Do be careful walking through town with valuables. These are uncertain times. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Blackwood knew something, wanted something. After the lawyer left, Amos remained sitting, his heart racing. Come on, boy, he said finally. We need to talk to Doc. They left the Miller property, Dusty staying close, alert. The sun was fully up now, but Amos felt cold. Elizabeth's words echoed. This is my sin, my burden. Now it was his burden too. 2 sons, one who knew nothing of his true parentage, wearing the same badge Amos once wore. Another living with wealth and privilege, believing himself a Thornton, and somewhere in all of this, a fortune in mineral rights that men like Silas Blackwood would kill for. Amos looked down at Dusty. You knew, he said quietly. All along you knew. Dusty's tail wagged once, and in his dark eyes, Amos could have sworn he saw Elizabeth looking back at him. All right, Lizzie, Amos whispered. I'll do right by them. I'll do right by our boys. Whatever it takes, the dog barked once, sharp and clear. Then they headed back toward town, toward the beginning of a journey that would unravel 40 years of secrets. Doc Holloway's office smelled of carbolic acid and old leather, a scent that had become as familiar to Amos over the years as his own home. The physician sat behind his desk, the photograph and letter spread before him, his face grave as he studied them for the 3rd time. Lord have mercy, Doc murmured, removing his spectacles to rub his eyes. Caleb, our Caleb. My Caleb, Amos corrected, the words still foreign on his tongue. My son. The older man looked up, sympathy etched in every line of his weathered face. You can't tell him, Amos, not yet. Not until we understand what we're dealing with here. He has a right to know. He has a right to the truth, yes, but the whole truth. And we don't have that yet. Doc gestured to the letter. There's another boy out there, a twin brother, and this inheritance that Blackwood's clearly after. We need to be careful, strategic. Amos paced the small office, Dusty watching him from the corner where the dog had settled. Elizabeth wanted them to know. She wrote it clear as day. Elizabeth's been dead 40 years, God rest her soul. She couldn't have known how complicated this would become. Doc leaned back in his chair. Think about it, Amos. Caleb's built his whole life on being Samuel Pritchard's nephew, learning the truth that changes everything. His identity, His place in this town, his entire past becomes a lie. It's not a lie. It's just the truth been hiding all this time, waiting to blow up in everyone's face. Doc stood, moving to the window that overlooked Main Street. And then there's the other boy. The Thorntons are powerful people, Amos, rich, connected. If this gets out wrong, if it becomes about money and inheritance, you could lose both your sons before you ever really have them. The words hit hard, because they were true. Amos sank into the chair across from Doc's desk, suddenly feeling every one of his 68 years. What do I do then? We research, quietly. Find out about this other boy. Is he even alive? What's his situation? Then we figure out how to approach this without destroying lives in the process. Amos nodded slowly. The church records. Pastor Elijah might have something on Elizabeth, on the births. I'll check the old census records too. In the territorial archives in Helena, Elizabeth mentioned documents there about the inheritance. Doc picked up the photograph, studying Elizabeth's young face. You know, I do remember her working at May's diner just briefly. May might remember more. And Blackwood. Doc's expression darkened. That man's a snake. Whatever he knows, whatever he wants, it's not for anyone's good but his own. We need to find out how he's connected to all this. They spent the next hour planning, two old men trying to untangle a web of secrets that had been 40 years in the weaving. When Amos finally left, the sun was high overhead, and Caleb was making his rounds on Main Street. The young deputy waved, his honest face breaking into a smile. Amos, been looking for you. Got a report of some trouble out at the old Miller place. Somebody said they saw you out there. Amos's heart clenched. Looking at Caleb now, knowing what he knew, he could see it, the resemblance to himself in the set of the jaw, to Elizabeth in the kind brown eyes. How had he never noticed before? Just taking Dusty for a walk, Amos said, proud that his voice remained steady. Dog's got curious habits, likes to explore old places. Caleb knelt to scratch Dusty behind the ears. He's looking good. Can't believe this is the same dying animal you bought off that drifter. He glanced up. You okay, Amos? You look pale, just tired. Old bones don't handle the heat like they used to. Why don't you head home, rest up? I'll stop by May's, have her bring you some supper later. That'd be kind of you, son. Amos caught himself, the word hanging in the air with terrible irony. Kind of you, Caleb. If the deputy noticed anything strange, he didn't show it. He stood, dusting off his knees. Oh, before I forget, Mr. Blackwood was asking about you. Said he needed to discuss some legal matter? Already talked to him. All right, then. Caleb settled his hat. You take care now, and Amos, it's real good seeing you have some company. You seem, I don't know, more alive than you've been since Sarah passed. After Caleb walked away, Amos stood frozen in the middle of the street, watching his son, continue his rounds. The weight of the secret felt like a physical burden, pressing down on his shoulders. That evening, May arrived with supper, pot roast and potatoes, with apple pie for after. She settled into Sarah's chair without being asked, her ample frame filling it completely. Heard you had an interesting morning, she said, watching Amos pick at his food. Town's buzzing about you poking around the Miller place. News travels fast, always has in Whetstone Creek. May paused, her sharp eyes studying him. You're looking for something, aren't you? Something to do with that dog showing up when he did. Amos set down his fork. May had known him too long to fool. You remember Elizabeth Pritchard? May's expression shifted, surprise, then understanding, then something like sorrow. I remember. Worked for me briefly, sweet girl. There were whispers when she left, cruel ones, about why a young woman might suddenly need to disappear. She had a child. Two, actually. Lord save us. May's hand went to her chest. 2 babies? And you're the father? I didn't know. Not until Dusty led me to letters she'd hidden. May looked at the dog, who sat alert by Amos's side. That animal's got the devil's own sense for finding things. Or maybe an angel's. She leaned forward. What are you going to do, Amos? Find them. Both of them. Both? May's eyes widened as understanding dawned. Sweet mercy. The Thornton boy. Everyone knows Elizabeth went to work for them before she died. And the other, She stopped, her hand flying to her mouth. Caleb? Amos nodded. Does he know? Not yet. Can't tell him. Not until I understand everything. May sat back, her face troubled. Amos Keene, you're walking into a storm. The Thorntons have power and money. Caleb's got his whole life built on being who he thinks he is. And that inheritance Elizabeth mentioned, men have killed for less. I know the risks. Do you? Because I'm looking at a man who just found out he's got sons, 2 of them, and I see hope in your eyes. Hope can make a man foolish, especially when he's got nothing left to lose. I've got everything to lose now, Amos said quietly. Just found out about it. May reached across and squeezed his hand. Then be smart about it. Be the sheriff you were, not just the father you want to be. After she left, Amos sat alone in the gathering darkness, Dusty's head resting on his knee. The dog had been quiet all evening, as if sensing the weight of what they'd discovered. Tomorrow we go to the church, Amos told him. See what Pastor Elijah knows. But even as he spoke, doubt gnawed at him. Doc was right. This wasn't just about finding his sons. It was about protecting them from whatever storm was gathering. And at the center of that storm was Silas Blackwood, circling like a vulture, waiting for his chance to strike. Amos pulled Elizabeth's photograph from his pocket, studying it in the lamplight. 2 babies, innocent and perfect, unaware of the secrets that would shape their lives. His sons, his boys, I'll protect them, Lizzie, he whispered. Whatever it takes. Dusty whined softly, and somewhere in the night the wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of rain and change. The journey to Helena began 3 days later. Doc Holloway had insisted on joining. You need someone watching your back, and those knees won't make it without my liniment, the physician argued. Amos was grateful for the company. They took the stage north, Dusty sitting at Amos's feet, alert and watchful. Helena bustled with activity when they arrived. A territorial capital full of miners, merchants, and opportunity. The old orphanage Mrs. Finch had mentioned stood on the outskirts, converted now into a boarding house. The proprietor was a woman in her 70s, thin with sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. I remember the Pritchard case, Mrs. Gladys Finch said, leading them to a small parlor. Spring of 1850, sad business. Young woman dying, leaving a baby behind. Just one baby? Amos asked carefully, her eyes narrowed. That's what the records show. But there were always rumors. The Pritchard woman arrived looking further along than dates suggested. Talk of complications during birth. What kind of complications? The kind that sometimes happen with twins. She sat heavily. But official record shows only one adoption. Do the Thornton family wealthy ranchers from Wyoming? Amos's heart raced. Could there have been a second child? If there was, it wasn't recorded properly. Dusty suddenly stood and walked to an old secretary desk in the corner, pawing at it insistently. Mrs. Finch frowned. Strange dog. She opened the desk, revealing old ledgers. She pulled out a leather-bound journal, dusty and cracked. Flipping through yellowed pages, she stopped. Well, there is something odd here. The entry read, March 1850, Pritchard matter concluded. 1 child to Thornton family. Second matter handled privately per mother's wishes. No record to be kept. Second matter, Amos repeated. Looks like 2 babies after all, Mrs. Finch said. And your Elizabeth wanted 1 adoption official, 1 off the books. She showed them what records she had. The Thornton boy was named Thomas. The adoption was sealed, legal, complete. But one detail chilled Amos. The Thorntons had a lawyer handle everything, Mrs. Finch said. Man named Blackwood. Father of your current town lawyer, I'd wager. Doc and Amos exchanged glances. Silas Blackwood's connection went back generations. They stayed overnight and began the journey back to Whetstone Creek the next morning. They'd barely left town when 3 riders appeared on the trail ahead, blocking their path. Amos studied them. Too well dressed for road agents, too well armed. Professional muscle, he muttered. The lead rider moved forward, looking for a man traveling with a dog. Old Sheriff from Whetstone Creek. I'm Keene, Amos called out. We need to see what you found at the Miller place. Don't have it with me. The riders moved closer, hands near weapons. Then we'll search you. Dusty's growl built in intensity, hackles raised. The lead rider's horse shied nervously. That dog bites, we shoot it, the man warned. You'll try, Amos said calmly, hand moving to his Colt. But let me ask you, you know who hired you? Blackwood. Said you stole documents. Did he mention those documents prove he's been defrauding the rightful heirs for years? Amos lied smoothly. Those papers are with the territorial marshal in Helena. Filed official complaint this morning. The riders exchanged uncertain glances. Blackwood can take it up with territorial authorities, Amos said. Now you boys planning to let us pass? After a tense moment, the riders wheeled their horses and rode off. That was too close, Doc breathed. They'll be back, Amos said. We need to move fast when we get home. They reached Whetstone Creek as the sun set. Caleb met them at the stage depot, concerned. Thank God you're safe. Had word about trouble on the road. He helped Doc with bags. Mr. Blackwood's been asking after you. Said something about you taking his property? Blackwood's got his facts wrong, Amos replied. Don't worry, son. That word again, loaded with meaning Caleb couldn't know. Found something while you were gone, Caleb said. Been checking land records. The Miller property, there's a claim from way back. Mineral rights assigned to Elizabeth Pritchard. Amos stopped walking. What? Filed in 1850, assigns mineral rights to her heirs to be held in trust. Trustee was Jeremiah Miller, but when he died, the trust should have passed to whoever her heirs are. And Blackwood bought surface rights but not mineral rights. Those still belonged to Elizabeth Pritchard's estate. Caleb's eyes were troubled. Amos, there's talk of silver deposits on that land, worth a fortune. So Blackwood's been trying to find the heirs, Doc said. Or make sure they never find out, Amos added. They reached Doc's office to find it ransacked. Papers scattered, furniture overturned. Someone was looking for something, Caleb said. Hand on his gun, Amos thought of the photograph and letter. Safe in his vest pocket. I'll file a report, Caleb said. Maybe post a guard on your place, too. That night, with Caleb standing guard outside, Amos sat at his kitchen table with Doc. We're running out of time, Amos said. Blackwood knows we found something. Then we need to find Thomas Thornton before Blackwood does, Doc replied. Bring both your sons together. Tell them the truth. And if Thomas doesn't want anything to do with me, or Caleb, then at least they'll know the truth. Doc poured whiskey. Elizabeth trusted you to do right by them. Now trust yourself. Amos lifted his glass. To truth, then. They drank, two old men protecting sons from dangers they couldn't quite see. Outside, the night pressed close, full of watching eyes. And somewhere in Wyoming territory, Thomas Thornton was about to have his world turned upside down. Amos spent the next morning in the county recorder's office, piecing together the puzzle of Elizabeth's legacy. The more he uncovered, the clearer the picture became, and the more dangerous the situation grew. Thomas Thornton, age 42, matched the timeline perfectly. He'd built a reputation as a ruthless businessman, buying up struggling ranches and turning them profitable. Recent records showed he'd returned to Montana, purchasing land near Whetstone Creek through a series of shell companies. He's been here for months, Caleb said, reviewing the documents with Amos. Bought the old Patterson Ranch just 10 miles east. Why didn't he make himself known? Maybe he's investigating his own past, Doc suggested. They'd gathered in Amos's kitchen, papers spread across the table. Man finds out he's adopted, starts asking questions, and Blackwood's his lawyer, Amos finished. Has been handling all his land purchases. The connection was damning. Silas Blackwood had known about both twins all along, had been positioning himself to control the inheritance, keeping Thomas close while searching for evidence of Caleb's existence. A knock at the door interrupted them. Deputy Caleb answered, returning with a worried-looking woman, Anna Prescott, a young widow whose farm bordered the Miller property. Sheriff Keene, she said, twisting her hands. I'm sorry to bother you, but Mr. Blackwood came by my place this morning. He's demanding I sell my farm, said I'm sitting on his mineral rights. He's lying, Amos said gently. Those mineral rights belong to Elizabeth Pritchard's estate. He threatened foreclosure. Said the bank would call my loan if I didn't cooperate. Anna's eyes filled with tears. I can't lose my farm. It's all I have for my boy. Amos felt the old protective instincts rising. This was exactly the kind of bullying he'd spent 40 years fighting. He can't force you to sell what isn't his to claim, Maybe not legally, Caleb said, his jaw tight. But Blackwood's got connections at the bank. He could make her life difficult, then we'll make his life difficult right back. Amos stood, decision made. Caleb, I need you to ride out to the Patterson Ranch. Find Thomas Thornton. Tell him there's urgent business regarding his adoption and inheritance. You're going to tell him? Doc asked, surprised. Time's run out for secrets. Blackwood's moving against innocent people now. We need Thomas to know the truth before Blackwood twists it to his advantage. After Caleb left, Amos turned to Anna. I'll talk to the bank. In the meantime, don't sign anything Blackwood puts in front of you. That night, Amos broke into Blackwood's law office. It was risky. If caught, his word against Blackwood's wouldn't count for much. But he needed proof of the lawyer's schemes. Dusty stood guard by the door as Amos worked by candlelight, rifling through files. The dog's presence was reassuring. Twice he growled low when someone passed on the street outside, giving Amos time to hide. In Blackwood's safe, opened with skills Amos had learned tracking safecrackers 40 years ago, he found what he was looking for. A deed assigning Elizabeth's mineral rights to Thomas Thornton, sole heir. It was dated just last month, with Elizabeth's signature forged at the bottom. There was more. Correspondence between Blackwood and Thomas, showing the lawyer had been feeding Thomas lies about his adoption, steering him away from the truth while positioning himself to control the inheritance. But the most damning document was a telegram from just yesterday. Second heir located in Whetstone Creek. Eliminate before verification possible. Amos's blood ran cold. Blackwood knew about Caleb, and eliminate could only mean one thing. He pocketed the documents and slipped out into the night. Dusty led him home through back alleys, avoiding the main streets where Blackwood might have watchers. Back home, Amos found Doc waiting with grave news. Pastor Elijah came by. He wants to talk to you, said it's urgent. About Elizabeth. They met the pastor at the church, finding him agitated. Pacing before the altar, I can't keep silent anymore, Elijah said, his thin face pale. Mr. Blackwood threatened me, said if I spoke about Elizabeth's confessions, he'd ruin me. But I'm a man of God, and I can't let innocent people suffer for my cowardice. What confessions? Amos asked. Elizabeth came to me before she died in Helena. She was terrified, convinced someone was trying to poison her because of the inheritance. She made me promise to hide certain documents, to only reveal them if her sons came looking. What documents? Elijah led them to a hidden compartment behind the altar. Inside was another letter from Elizabeth, this one recent, written months before her death, not years. She knew, Amos breathed, reading Elizabeth's shaky handwriting. She knew someone wanted her dead. The letter named names. The elder Blackwood, father of Silas, had been trying to steal the mineral rights. Elizabeth had fought back, securing them for her sons, but paid the ultimate price. She was murdered, Doc said quietly, and now his son's trying to finish the job, Amos added. He looked at Elijah. Why didn't you come forward before? Blackwood threatened my family, my position. I was a coward. The pastor's shame was evident. But tonight, when I heard he's threatening Mrs. Prescott, when I learned he might harm Caleb, I couldn't stay silent. A commotion outside made them all freeze. Shouting, the sound of horses, gunfire, they rushed out to find Main Street in chaos. Smoke rose from the direction of Anna Prescott's farm, visible on the horizon. Caleb came riding hard into town, his face grim. Blackwood's men fired Anna's barn. She and her boy barely got out alive. Where is she now? Amos demanded. May's taking care of them. But Amos, Caleb's voice broke. Thomas Thornton was there. He stopped them from burning the house, but he took a bullet doing it. Is he alive? Barely. Doc, we need you. As they rushed toward May's diner, Dusty ran ahead, leading the way. Amos's mind raced. His son, his other son, bleeding out in a diner. Shot protecting a widow from a conspiracy that had already claimed one life. They found Thomas Thornton lying on a table in May's back room, his shirt soaked with blood. He was a tall man, strongly built, with dark hair streaked with silver, and when his pain-filled eyes met Amos's, there was no denying the resemblance. You must be Keene, Thomas rasped. Your deputy, he told me about the adoption. Save your strength, Doc said, examining the wound. Bullet went clean through, missed the lung. Blackwood's been lying to me for months, Thomas continued, gripping Amos's hand with surprising strength. Said he was helping me find my birth parents, but he was just using me. We'll deal with Blackwood, Amos promised. Right now, you need to rest. No time. Thomas struggled to sit up. He's planning something bigger. Overheard his men. They're going after someone else tonight. Someone named Caleb. Amos's heart stopped. He turned to find Caleb standing in the doorway. Understanding dawning on the young deputy's face as he looked between Amos and Thomas. It's true, isn't it? Caleb said quietly. Samuel Pritchard wasn't my uncle. Elizabeth was my mother. And you, he looked at Amos. You're my father. The moment hung suspended, 40 years of secrets crystallizing into devastating truth. Before Amos could respond, before he could explain or apologize or plead, a voice called from outside. Sheriff Keene. I know you're in there. Silas Blackwood stood in the street, flanked by hired guns, his face twisted with rage. Time's up, old man. Send out the Thornton boy and that bastard deputy, or I burn this whole town down. The final confrontation had arrived, and Amos Keene, 68 years old, with 2 sons who'd just learned the truth and a legacy of lies to untangle, had to decide how to protect everyone he'd ever loved from a man who'd stop at nothing to claim what wasn't his. The silence in May's back room was thick as molasses. Thomas Thornton lay on the table, pale but conscious, his eyes moving between Amos and Caleb with dawning comprehension. Caleb stood frozen in the doorway, his face cycling through shock, hurt, and confusion. Outside, Blackwood's voice rang out again. You have 5 minutes, Keene. We need a plan, Doc said, his medical instincts warring with the tactical situation. Thomas can't be moved, not in his condition. Then we defend this position, Amos said, the old sheriff in him taking command. May, get Anna and her boy upstairs, away from windows. Doc, you stay with Thomas. Caleb, don't, Caleb said, his voice tight. Don't call me son, don't give me orders, not right now. The words hit Amos like a physical blow, but he couldn't blame the boy, the man, his son. Everything Caleb had believed about himself had just been torn away. I'm still the law in this town, Caleb said, his hand moving to his badge. And Blackwood just confessed to arson and attempted murder. He's my prisoner, or will be, once we handle those guns he's hired. Thomas struggled to sit up. I can help. This is my fight too. You can barely stand, Doc protested. I don't need to stand to shoot. Thomas's jaw set with determination. Amos recognized that stubborn look. Had seen it in his own mirror countless times. Blackwood used me, lied to me, kept me from knowing I had a brother, a father. His eyes found Amos. I don't know what to feel about that yet, but I know how to handle men like Blackwood. A strange telegram had arrived for Thomas just that afternoon, delivered by a rider who'd seemed nervous, eager to leave quickly. Caleb had read it aloud earlier. Your birth mother, Elizabeth Pritchard, murdered 1850. Lawyer Silas Blackwood Sr. involved. Current Blackwood continuing father's scheme to steal inheritance. Mineral rights worth fortune. You have twin brother in Whetstone Creek. Trust Sheriff Keene. The telegram was unsigned, but Amos suspected Pastor Elijah had sent it, trying to make amends for his years of silence. 3 minutes, Blackwood shouted. We can't fight them all, May said, wringing her hands. There's 7 of them, maybe more. Then we even the odds. Amos moved to the window, careful to stay out of sight. The street was empty except for Blackwood and his hired guns. Smart townspeople had barricaded themselves indoors, but Amos knew this town, knew its people. 40 years of protecting them had earned loyalty that went deeper than fear. Caleb, he said, there's a shotgun behind the bar. May keeps it loaded. I know, Caleb replied, his voice carefully neutral. I used to practice with it when I was learning to shoot. Samuel, he caught himself, pain flashing across his face. The man I thought was my uncle used to bring me here, let me help May clean up. Said a lawman needed to know every building in his town, every defensive position. He taught you well, Amos said softly. Samuel Pritchard was a good man. He loved you like his own, but I wasn't his own, was I? Caleb's eyes glistened. I was Elizabeth's bastard, hidden away to avoid scandal. And you didn't even know I existed. If I had known 2 minutes. Blackwood's patience was wearing thin. Thomas spoke up, his voice strained but steady.
I didn't know either.
I spent my whole life as Thomas Thornton, building a reputation, making money, never feeling like I quite fit with the family that raised me. Turns out there was a reason for that. He looked at Caleb, really looked at him. We're brothers. Twin brothers. That's something, isn't it? Caleb's expression softened slightly. You risked your life for Anna Prescott. A woman you don't even know. Seemed like the right thing to do. Thomas managed a weak smile. Must run in the family. Heard tell our father made a career of doing the right thing. Consequences be damned. Our father, Caleb repeated, trying the words out. God, I don't even know what this is. It's the truth, Amos said. Should have been told years ago, but Elizabeth thought she was protecting you both. And Samuel, he kept a secret to protect you, Caleb. Everything they did out of love. 1 minute. Enough talking, May announced, emerging from her kitchen with her own rifle. That snake out there killed Elizabeth Pritchard, tried to kill Thomas, and threatened my town. Time to remind him why nobody messes with Whetstone Creek. As if on cue, movement appeared in windows up and down Main Street. Townsfolk, armed and angry, taking positions. The blacksmith appeared with his sons. 3 ranch hands from the Patterson spread, Thomas's men, rode in from the east. Even old Pastor Elijah emerged from the church, carrying an ancient rifle. Blackwood's hired guns shifted nervously, suddenly realizing they were surrounded. Looks like your odds just changed, Blackwood, Amos called out. You're outgunned and outmanned. Surrender now, and maybe you'll live to stand trial. You have no proof of anything. Blackwood shouted back, but his voice wavered. I have Elizabeth's letters, Amos replied. Your father's correspondence. Documents proving you've been defrauding Thomas for years. Witnesses to tonight's arson and attempted murder. And 2 sons who finally know the truth about their inheritance. That inheritance is mine. My father worked for it, arranged everything, deserves... Your father murdered a woman to steal what wasn't his, Caleb cut in, stepping into the doorway where Blackwood could see him. And you've been continuing his crime. Well, that ends tonight. Thomas appeared beside Caleb, leaning heavily on the doorframe but standing nonetheless. The 2 men, brothers, stood shoulder to shoulder, facing down the man who'd tried to destroy them. Look at that, Thomas said quietly, just loud enough for those inside to hear. We've got the same stance, same way of holding ourselves. How did I never see it before? Because you weren't looking, Caleb replied, equally quiet. Neither was I. Blackwood's face twisted with rage. You think you've won? You're nothing but bastards, both of you. That inheritance should have... Drop your weapons, Caleb commanded, his voice carrying the authority of the law. You're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, arson, and the murder of Elizabeth Pritchard. For a long moment, no one moved. Then one of Blackwood's hired guns shifted, reaching for his pistol. Dusty exploded through the door, moving faster than Amos had ever seen. The dog hit the gunman square in the chest, knocking him down, teeth bared. The man's weapon clattered to the street. The action broke the standoff. 2 more hired guns dropped their weapons and raised their hands. We ain't dying for Blackwood, one announced. But Blackwood himself drew his pistol, aiming not at the deputies or townspeople, but at Anna Prescott's window where she watched from above with her son. If I can't have it, nobody... 2 shots rang out simultaneously, Caleb's and Thomas's, both found their mark. Blackwood spun and fell, his unfired weapon spinning away into the dirt. The street erupted in activity. The remaining hired guns were quickly disarmed and detained. Doc rushed out to tend to Blackwood, though it was clear the lawyer wouldn't survive his wounds. Amos stood in the doorway, watching his sons. His sons worked together as if they'd been partners for years. Caleb directed townspeople in securing the prisoners, while Thomas, despite his injury, helped Anna Prescott and her boy down from May's 2nd story. You should be resting, Anna scolded Thomas, her worry evident even through the chaos. I'm fine, Thomas assured her, but his pale face suggested otherwise. Their eyes met and held for a moment longer than necessary. Blackwood coughed, blood on his lips. Doc shook his head, nothing to be done. The lawyer's eyes found Amos. "Should have been mine," he rasped. "Father promised all of it. Your father promised you stolen goods," Amos said, kneeling beside the dying man. "Elizabeth's legacy belongs to her sons, as it should have from the beginning." Blackwood's eyes glazed over. His last breath rattled out as Pastor Elijah arrived to administer final rites. The streets slowly quieted. Prisoners were locked in the small jail. Townspeople dispersed, the crisis over. And finally, Amos found himself alone with both his sons in May's back room. "So," Thomas said, settling carefully back onto the table while Doc re-examined his wound. "Where do we go from here?" "That's up to you, boys," Amos replied. "Both of you." Caleb paced the small room. "I need time. Time to think, to understand, to figure out who I am now, that everything I believed was a lie." "Not everything," Amos said gently. "Samuel loved you, raised you right, made you the good man you are. That's not a lie, but he wasn't my father." Caleb's voice cracked. "You are, and I don't even know you." "Not really," Thomas spoke up. "I don't know him either, but I'd like to. If that's all right with both of you." The three men looked at each other, bound by blood and secrets, separated by years of deception. Outside, dawn was breaking over Whetstone Creek, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. "Elizabeth wanted us to know each other," Amos said. "She loved us all enough to sacrifice everything. Maybe we owe it to her to try." Caleb stopped pacing. "What about the inheritance? The mineral rights?" "Belongs to both of you," Amos said. "Equal shares like Elizabeth intended." "And you?" Thomas asked. "Don't you want anything?" "I've got everything I need." Amos looked at his sons, both of them, together in one room for the first time in 42 years. "I've got my boys back," Dusty whined softly from his position by the door. The dog had been unusually quiet since Blackwood's death, as if some great purpose had been fulfilled. "That dog," Thomas said, shaking his head. "There's something not quite natural about him." "No," Amos agreed. "There isn't. But then there's nothing quite natural about any of this." They talked through the night. Three men connected by blood and circumstance, sharing stories and trying to build bridges across 4 decades of separation. By morning, they hadn't solved everything. Some wounds take more than a night to heal. But they'd made a start, and as the sun rose fully over Whetstone Creek, washing away the darkness of the previous night, Amos Keene sat between his two sons and felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope for the future. Morning light was just beginning to filter through May's windows when Dusty suddenly stood, ears pricked forward, a low whine building in his throat. The dog moved to the door, pawing at it with unusual urgency. "What's got into him?" Doc asked, looking up from rebandaging Thomas's wound. Amos knew that look, had seen it before when Dusty led him to Elizabeth's letters, to the Miller property, to truth after buried truth. "He wants to show us something." "Now?" Caleb rubbed his tired eyes. None of them had slept. "Can't it wait?" But Dusty was already scratching frantically at the door. Against his better judgment and Doc's protests about Thomas needing rest, Amos followed the dog out into the early morning streets. Thomas and Caleb came too, the brothers walking side by side, still getting used to each other's presence. Dusty led them not to the Miller property or the church, but to Blackwood's law office. The door hung open, exactly as it had been left after Amos's midnight search. But now, in the growing light, Dusty went straight to Blackwood's safe, still open from Amos's earlier break-in. "We already searched that," Amos said. "Found the forged deed and the threatening telegram." Dusty ignored him, climbing partially into the safe itself, pawing at something. When Amos looked closer, he saw what the dog had found: a false bottom in the safe, barely visible. "Well, I'll be," Doc breathed. "Never thought to look for that." Working together, they pried up the false bottom. Underneath lay a single photograph and a small leather pouch. The photograph made Amos's heart stop. It showed Elizabeth Pritchard, but not alone. She stood with a woman Amos recognized, Mrs. Pritchard, Samuel's wife, the woman who'd raised Caleb as her own nephew. But it wasn't just the two women that shocked him. Elizabeth held not one baby but two, just like in the other photograph. Except in this one, Both babies were clearly visible, and written on the back in Elizabeth's hand was a note that changed everything. My beloved sons, Thomas and Caleb, may they someday know they are brothers. May they forgive me for what I must do to protect them. The truth lies where it began, in the place we first loved, the place we first loved, Amos murmured. His mind raced back 43 years to a young man courting a beautiful girl. They'd had a special place, a meadow by the creek where the wildflowers grew thick and the old oak tree provided shade. You know where that is? Thomas asked. I think so. But Amos was more focused on the leather pouch. Inside were documents, official territorial records showing not 2 adoptions, but 3. 3? Caleb grabbed the papers, scanning them quickly. That's impossible. There were only 2 of us, but the documents told a different story. 3 babies born to Elizabeth Pritchard on March 15, 1850. Triplets, not twins. The room spun. Amos sat down heavily, his mind struggling to process this revelation. 3 sons, he whispered. We have 3 sons. The Pritchard adoption lists 1 child. Doc read over Caleb's shoulder. The Thornton adoption lists 1 child. But this 3rd document, it's an adoption arranged through a Catholic orphanage in Helena. Different from the one we visited. Who adopted the 3rd child? Thomas demanded. Doc's hands trembled as he read. A family named Pritchard. But not Samuel Pritchard. His wife's brother, James Pritchard. He paused, lives right here in Whetstone Creek. The revelation hit them like a thunderbolt. James Pritchard had died 5 years ago, everyone knew that. But he'd left a widow and a son. Caleb, Thomas said slowly, working it through. You said Samuel Pritchard raised you as his nephew, that his wife, your aunt, helped raise you after he died. Yes, Aunt Margaret. She passed 2 years ago. But James Pritchard, Samuel's brother-in-law, he also had a son. Didn't he? Caleb's face went white. Yes, but we weren't close. Different parts of town, different... He stopped. Sweet Lord, you don't mean... Who was James Pritchard's son? Amos asked, though dread was already building in his chest. He worked at the livery stable. Young fella, bit of a loner. He left town about a year ago, went... Where? Thomas pressed. Caleb's voice was barely a whisper. He went to Wyoming. To work on a ranch. The pieces clicked together with terrible clarity. Elizabeth hadn't just separated 2 babies. She'd separated 3. 1 to the wealthy Thorntons. 1 to Samuel Pritchard in Whetstone Creek, and 1 to Samuel's brother-in-law James, also in Whetstone Creek, but far enough removed that the boys grew up not knowing they were brothers. What was his name? Amos asked. James Pritchard's son. We called him... Caleb swallowed hard. We called him Deputy when he helped out at the stable, but his given name was... A voice from the doorway finished for him. Daniel Pritchard. They spun to find a young man standing there, maybe in his early 20s, with dark hair and familiar brown eyes. He held a rifle, not quite aimed at them, but not quite pointed away either. Though I've gone by other names, the young man continued, stepping into the office. When I found out I was adopted, I started asking questions, started investigating. That's when Blackwood found me, told me lies, tried to use me against my own... His voice caught. Against my own brothers. Amos stared at him, seeing the resemblance now. Not identical to Caleb or Thomas, but similar enough. The same strong jaw, the same set to the shoulders. Daniel, Caleb breathed. I remember you. Quiet kid, always working. We never knew we were brothers. Daniel's laugh was bitter. Elizabeth split us 3 ways. The rich one, the lawman, and the nobody. Guess which one I was? You're not a nobody, Thomas said firmly. You're our brother. Our blood? Blood. Daniel spat the word. You want to talk about blood? Blackwood showed me letters, documents proving our mother, our real mother, abandoned me just like she abandoned you. Only difference is you 2 got families that loved you. I got James Pritchard, a drunk who beat me more often than fed me. That's not... Amos started. Not what? Not true? Daniel's hands tightened on the rifle. I spent my whole life wondering why I wasn't good enough, why my uncle hated me so much. Turns out I was a bastard charity case, foisted on him by a dead woman who couldn't be bothered to keep track of how many babies she had. Elizabeth loved you, Amos said, standing slowly. All of you. She made impossible choices trying to protect you. By giving me to a monster. By splitting us up so we'd never know each other. Daniel's voice rose. Blackwood told me about the inheritance. Told me it was supposed to be mine, all mine, but you three were trying to steal it. He hired me, paid me, to keep watch, report back, help him claim what was rightfully his. And you believed him? Caleb asked. Why wouldn't I? He was the first person who ever told me I mattered, that I deserved something better. Daniel's eyes glistened. Then tonight I heard the shooting, heard him die, and I found his other papers, the real ones, showing he'd lied about everything. So you came here, Thomas said. So I came here to find the truth myself. Daniel lowered the rifle slightly. And I find I have two brothers, and a father who didn't even know I existed. Amos moved forward slowly, hands out, non-threatening. Son, don't, Daniel backed up. Don't call me that. You don't get to call me that after 42 years of nothing. He didn't know, Caleb said. None of us knew. Elizabeth kept the secret to protect us. Well, her secret nearly got us all killed. Daniel gestured with the rifle. Blackwood's dead, but his hired men are still out there. And they know about me, about being the third heir. They'll come looking. Then we face them together, Thomas said, moving to stand beside Caleb. 3 brothers, united. You don't get it. Daniel's voice cracked. I helped them. I told Blackwood where you were, Caleb. I helped plan the attack on your farm, Thomas. I'm not the hero in this story. I'm the villain. The weight of this confession hung in the air. Amos saw his sons, all 3 of them now, standing in the ruins of Blackwood's office, the truth finally revealed, but at what cost? You were lied to, Amos said quietly. Manipulated. That doesn't make you a villain. Doesn't make me innocent either. No, Caleb agreed. But it makes you family. And family, real family, forgives. Daniel stared at his brothers, the words still foreign to him. I don't know if we can, then we figure it out, Thomas said. Together, Dusty whined softly, moving to Daniel's side. The young man looked down at the dog, surprise flickering across his face. This is the dog, the one that started all this. Elizabeth's guardian angel, Duck said. Or maybe her messenger. Daniel knelt and Dusty licked his face, tail wagging. For the first time, Daniel smiled, a tentative, broken thing, but real. 3 sons, Amos said, looking at them all. Lord help me, Elizabeth, you gave me 3 sons. Outside, the sun rose fully over Whetstone Creek, but the shadows weren't done with them yet. Somewhere in town, Blackwood's remaining hired guns were regrouping, and they knew about the third heir now. The real battle was just beginning. The discovery of Elizabeth's final letter came an hour later, hidden exactly where her note had indicated, beneath the old oak tree in the meadow where she and Amos had first courted. Daniel, seeking some kind of connection to the mother he'd never known, had insisted on going there. The letter was sealed in a tin box, buried shallow, waiting 42 years to be found. Amos's hands trembled as he opened it, his 3 sons gathered around him in the early morning light. Pastor Elijah had finally confessed everything. Blackwood's father had threatened him into silence decades ago, and Silas had continued the intimidation. The pastor had hidden this final letter at Elizabeth's deathbed request, only revealing its location now that the truth was finally emerging. The letter was dated the day Elizabeth died. My dearest Amos and my beloved sons, if you're reading this, then the truth has finally come to light. I pray Daniel has found his brothers, that you 3 stand together as I always dreamed you would. I was poisoned. Silas Blackwood's father added arsenic to my medicine slowly over weeks. He wanted the mineral rights, the fortune he'd discovered on the Miller property. When I refused to sign them over, he decided to wait for my death and forge the inheritance himself. I knew I was dying, knew he'd won. But I had one victory. My sons would inherit, not him. I split you 3 ways to protect you. The Blackwoods couldn't kill what they couldn't find. They knew about Thomas, thought he was the only heir. They never suspected triplets. Samuel and James Pritchard were good men who owed my family debts. They agreed to raise my other sons as their own. I begged them to never tell, to let you grow up safe from Blackwood's greed. I'm sorry for the pain this caused. Sorry Daniel suffered. Sorry you never knew each other. But you're alive, and that's what matters. The inheritance is yours, all three of you equally. Use it well. Use it to build the life together I couldn't give you. And Amos, my love, forgive me for keeping this from you. I loved you too much to see you hang for murder when you would have surely killed Blackwood for what he did to me. Our sons needed you alive even if you never knew they existed. Tell them I loved them. Every day, every moment. Tell them their mother's last thought was of them. With eternal love, Elizabeth. Silence fell over the meadow. Amos wiped tears from his weathered cheeks, not ashamed to show his grief after all these years. His sons, all three of them, stood with their own eyes glistening. She was murdered, Daniel said, his voice hollow. And the Blackwoods got away with it for 40 years. Until now, Thomas said firmly. We have proof. We have witnesses. Pastor Elijah will testify. Blackwood's dead, Caleb pointed out. Justice for Elizabeth. Justice isn't just about punishment, Amos interrupted. It's about truth, about making sure the world knows what happened, about claiming what's rightfully yours. That's the justice Elizabeth deserves. They returned to town to find it in an uproar. Word had spread about the triplets, about the inheritance, about the decades-old murder. Townspeople lined Main Street, watching as Amos walked with his three sons toward Doc's office for a council of war. Inside, they found an unexpected ally. Anna Prescott had gathered documents, deeds, surveys, and mineral assessments her late husband had collected. My farm sits on the edge of the mineral deposit, she explained. I had a right to know what was underneath my land. Turns out it's worth more than anyone imagined. How much? Thomas asked. Conservative estimate? $500,000. Maybe more. The room fell silent at the staggering sum. In 1892, it was a fortune beyond comprehension. Enough to kill for, Doc said quietly. More than enough. Blackwood's men know about it now, Daniel said. I heard them talking before I understood what was really happening. They're planning to take it by force. Claim you three are imposters, that Blackwood was the rightful heir. On what grounds? Caleb demanded. They don't need grounds. They need guns. Daniel's face was grim. There's at least 20 of them, hired killers from across the territory. They were waiting for Blackwood's signal to move. 20 against what? 6 of us? Thomas counted. Himself, Caleb, Daniel, Amos, Doc, and the few townspeople who could shoot. 7, May announced, entering with her rifle. And don't count out the rest of Whetstone Creek. We're not letting outsiders steal from our own. I can get my ranch hands, Thomas offered. Good men loyal, and I can deputize citizens, Caleb added. Make it official. Amos watched his sons planning, working together despite just learning they were brothers. Pride swelled in his chest. We'll need more than guns. We need strategy. They spent the next hours preparing. Thomas's men rode in, 15 tough cowhands who'd followed him from Wyoming. Caleb deputized 20 townsmen, arming them from the sheriff's office and personal collections. Anna's farmhouse, sitting on the mineral-rich land, became the obvious battleground. They'll come for it, Daniel predicted. Try to take it, claim squatters' rights or some legal nonsense. Then we defend it, Thomas said. My men know how to hold a position, but it was Amos who saw the real strategy. We don't just defend, we trap them. He spread a map of Anna's property on the table. The farmhouse sits in a natural bowl, hills on 3 sides. They'll come from the east, the main road. We let them think it's undefended, draw them in, then hit them from the high ground. Thomas finished, seeing it. Classic pincer movement! Except we're not trying to kill them all, Caleb insisted. Some might be hired men who don't know the full story. We give them a chance to surrender, Amos agreed. But we prepare for the worst. The preparation became a family affair. Thomas positioned his ranch hands on the hills. Caleb coordinated with townspeople, setting up defensive positions. Daniel, desperate to prove himself, volunteered for the most dangerous job, staying in the farmhouse itself as bait. Absolutely not, Amos said immediately. I helped them, Daniel argued. I owe this. Let me make it right. You'll get yourself killed trying to prove something you don't need to prove. Amos gripped his younger son's shoulder.
You're not bait.
You're my son, and I just found you. I'm not losing you now. The words hung between them. Daniel's eyes filled with tears he'd been holding back. I never had a father. James Pritchard was. He was cruel, drunk, angry. I grew up thinking I deserved it, that I was worthless. You're not worthless, Thomas said, standing beside them. You're a Keene, our brother, and Keenes protect each other, Caleb added, joining them. That's what family does. The three brothers stood together, truly together, for the first time. Amos looked at them, the wealthy rancher, the lawman, and the lost boy, and saw the impossible miracle Elizabeth had created. Your mother loved you enough to die protecting you, Amos said. The least we can do is live up to that love. That evening, as they finalized positions, Dusty began acting strangely. The dog paced, whined, stared toward the eastern road. Then just as the sun touched the horizon, he barked, sharp, urgent, a warning. They're coming, Daniel said, recognizing the signs. Earlier than expected, through the gathering dusk, riders appeared. Not 20, closer to 30. Blackwood had recruited more than they'd known. Positions, Caleb ordered. Everyone to their places. The townspeople scattered to prearranged locations. Thomas's ranch hands melted into the hills. Anna and her son were safely hidden in May's cellar back in town. That left Amos and his 3 sons in the farmhouse, waiting for the storm to break. Whatever happens, Amos said, checking his Colt, the same weapon he'd carried for 40 years as sheriff. I want you boys to know I'm proud of you, all 3 of you. Your mother would be too. Thomas gripped his rifle. Caleb checked his ammunition. Daniel, despite his fear, stood firm. We're ready, Thomas said. Outside, the riders drew closer. The trap was set, the pieces in place. Elizabeth's sons, all 3 of them, would fight together for the inheritance their mother died protecting. Amos pinned on his old sheriff's badge, the one he'd kept hidden in a drawer since retiring. Been a while since I wore this, he said. Feels right somehow. Fighting one last time for what's just. Last time? Caleb questioned. Or first time as a father, Amos corrected with a slight smile. Depends on how you look at it. The riders were close now, visible in the fading light. Dusty stood at the door, hackles raised, ready to defend his family, Elizabeth's family, one final time. Here they come, Daniel whispered, and in that moment, standing with his sons, waiting for the battle that would decide their future, Amos Keene felt truly alive for the first time in 40 years. He'd bought a dying dog for $10 and found a family worth dying for. The shooting would start soon. The night would run red with blood and courage. But win or lose, live or die, Elizabeth's sons would face it together, as it should have been from the beginning. The lead rider stopped 50 yards from the farmhouse. Even in the dim light, Amos could make out the cruel set of his face, the calculating way he surveyed the property. This was no simple hired gun. This was a leader, a planner, someone who'd done this kind of work before. You in the house, the man called out. We know you're in there. We know about the inheritance, about the mineral rights. We're claiming this land under territorial law, adverse possession, and abandoned property statutes. That's horseshit and you know it. Caleb muttered. Send out the Keene boys and the old sheriff, the leader continued. Nobody else needs to die tonight. This is about money, not blood. It's always about blood with men like that, Thomas said quietly. Money's just the excuse. Amos moved to the window, staying in shadow. You're trespassing on private property. This is Sheriff Caleb Pritchard speaking. You're all under arrest. Laughter rippled through the riders. Pritchard? That's one of them, the bastard claiming to be heir. We got orders to take this land by any means necessary, the leader shouted back. Blackwood may be dead, but his backers ain't. They got legal claim Blackwood was a fraud and a murderer. Amos called out. We have proof. Witnesses. Documents. This land belongs to Elizabeth Pritchard's sons, all 3 of them. 3? The leader's surprise was evident. Blackwood said there was only 2. Blackwood lied about everything, Daniel yelled, his voice carrying across the yard. I should know, I worked for him. He played us all. The riders shifted nervously. This wasn't going according to their plan. Don't matter who owns what, the leader finally said. We got 30 guns. You got what? 4 of you in there? Maybe some townspeople hiding in the dark? We'll burn you out if we have to. Then you'll hang for murder, Caleb replied. Every man here will be hunted down by territorial law. Gotta catch us first. The leader raised his hand, signaling. Last chance. Come out peaceful, sign over the rights, and we'll let you live. Amos looked at his sons, his 3 sons, standing ready to fight for their birthright, for Elizabeth's memory, for family. What do you say, boys? He asked quietly. Thomas smiled grimly. I say they picked the wrong family to threaten. Caleb's jaw set with determination. I say we show them what Keenes are made of. Daniel gripped his rifle tighter. I say I'm ready to stand with my brothers. Amos nodded, peace settling over him. Then let's remind these sons of bitches why nobody messes with Whetstone Creek. He called out the window one final time. Here's our answer. Come and take it. The leader's hand dropped. The riders spurred their horses forward. The final battle for Elizabeth's legacy had begun. The first shots shattered the evening air. Amos dropped below the windowsill as bullets punched through the farmhouse walls. Beside him, Thomas returned fire with calculated precision. Across the room, Caleb and Daniel worked as a team, covering each other's reloads. They're spreading out. Thomas called. Trying to surround us. Let them, Amos replied. The further they spread, the more exposed they are. Gunfire erupted from the eastern ridge. Thomas's ranch hands opened up with devastating effect. 3 riders went down, their horses scattering. That's the signal. Caleb fired a flare gun, the prearranged sign for the townspeople to close the trap. From the western ridge, more shots rang out. The hired guns were caught in crossfire, but their leader rallied them, pulling back toward the barn. In there! Regroup! 6 men made it to the barn before Thomas took down another. They've got Anna's livestock in there, Thomas said. If they start shooting wild, then we go to them, Amos decided. End this before they dig in. That's suicide, Daniel protested, not through the front. Amos pointed to the storm cellar. Tunnel connects to the barn's foundation. Emergency escape route from Indian troubles. They moved quickly, Thomas staying upstairs, while Amos led Caleb and Daniel through the cellar. Dusty followed, silent as shadow. The tunnel was tight, dark. They crawled single file, Amos in front despite protesting knees. Why didn't you ever remarry? Daniel asked suddenly. After Sarah died? Didn't seem right. She deserved better than being second choice. Elizabeth was first, Caleb said. Elizabeth was complicated. Amos paused. Loved her fierce when young, but Sarah loved me patient. Through years of grieving, I didn't even recognize. Both deserved better. You didn't know about us, Daniel said softly. Can't I blame myself? Maybe I should have fought for her. She'd still be dead, Caleb finished. Blackwood's father poisoned her. You couldn't have stopped that. They reached the barn's foundation. Above, footsteps pounded, the hired guns positioning themselves. Voices carried, surround the house, burn it down if we have to. Boss said no witnesses. No witnesses meant murder regardless of surrender. Change the game, Caleb whispered. Changes nothing, Amos replied. We defend what's ours. He found the access panel, prying it open. It led to the empty tack room. They slipped through, weapons ready. The barn was huge, full of shadows. In the loft above, the hired guns focused on the farmhouse, not expecting attack from behind. Amos signaled. Caleb left, Daniel right, himself center. Dusty stayed with Daniel. They moved like smoke. Amos felt his age falling away. He was 30 again, immortal. His sons moved with him, reading his signals, matching his rhythm. The first hired gun never knew what hit him. Caleb took him down silently. The second turned to see Daniel's fist before unconsciousness, but the third spotted them. They're in the barn! Amos's shot was pure instinct. The man went down before he could fire. But the alarm was raised. The barn erupted in gunfire. Amos dove behind a feed trough, wood splintering above his head. Daniel rolled behind a support beam, returning fire. Caleb scrambled for the ladder to the loft. 3 of them down here! Someone shouted from above. The leader's voice cut through. Kill them! No prisoners! A hired gun appeared at the loft edge, aiming down at Amos. Thomas's rifle cracked from the farmhouse, taking the man down. The brothers were fighting together, even separated. Cover me! Caleb yelled, starting up the ladder. Daniel and Amos laid down, suppressing fire. Caleb climbed fast, reaching the loft as bullets chewed the wood around him. He disappeared into the shadows above, gunfire intensified, then screams. Caleb was fighting hand to hand in the loft. Amos moved forward, his old Colt steady in his hand. A hired gun jumped from behind a stall, weapon raised. Amos fired. 40 years of practice made the shot second nature. Daniel engaged another, their struggle fierce. The young man fought desperately, proving himself. Dusty leaped at the hired gun's arm, teeth finding flesh. Daniel finished it with a solid punch. Above, Caleb grappled with the leader. They crashed through hay bales, both fighting for survival. Amos climbed, knees screaming protest. Had to help his son. Had to. The leader got his hands around Caleb's throat. Caleb's face reddened, strength fading. Amos reached the loft. Let him go. The leader turned, saw Amos, smiled cruelly. Old man with a gun. What you gonna? Amos shot him. Center mass. The man released Caleb, stumbling backward. Caleb gasped for air. Below, the last hired guns threw down weapons, surrendering to Daniel and Dusty. It's over, Thomas called from the farmhouse. But the leader, bleeding, pulled a hidden pistol. Aimed at Caleb. No! Amos threw himself forward. 2 shots. The leader fell dead. Amos looked down, saw blood spreading across his chest. Well, he breathed. That's unfortunate. Pa. Daniel's scream echoed through the barn. Amos's knees gave out. He was falling, the world spinning, his sons' faces appearing above him, all 3 of them, together at last. Proud, he managed to whisper. So proud of you boys. Then darkness claimed him. No, Pa, no. Daniel's voice cracked as he cradled Amos's head. Blood spread across the old sheriff's chest, soaking through his vest, pooling on the barn floor. Get Doc. Caleb screamed, his own hands pressing desperately against the wound. Thomas, we need Doc now. From below, chaos erupted. Thomas was already running, shouting orders. The remaining hired guns, seeing their leader dead and the fight lost, threw down their weapons. They'd wanted money, not to die for it, but up in the loft, time seemed to stop. 3 sons surrounded their father, the father they'd just discovered, watching his life bleed away. Should have worn the badge sooner, Amos whispered, his weathered face pale. Should have known, should have found you boys. Don't talk, Caleb ordered, but his voice shook. Save your strength. For what? Amos managed a weak smile. I'm 68, boys. Been living on borrowed time since Sarah died. This ain't so bad. Got to see you 3 together. Got to... You're not dying, Daniel insisted fiercely. You can't, I just found you. We just found each other. Amos's hand reached up, touching Daniel's face. You look like her. Elizabeth got her eyes, her... He coughed, blood flecking his lips. Wish I'd known sooner. Wish I could have protected you from James Pritchard's... It doesn't matter now, Daniel said, tears streaming. What matters is you're here. You're my father. Our father. You can't leave us. Doc Holloway burst into the loft, medical bag in hand, May right behind him. The old physician took one look at Amos's wound and his face went grey. How bad? Thomas demanded. Doc didn't answer, just started working, tearing open Amos's shirt, examining the entry wound. Bullet's still in there, near the heart. If I try to remove it, he dies, Caleb finished. If you don't try, Thomas couldn't finish. He dies anyway, Doc said softly. I'm sorry, boys. I'm so sorry. Amos gripped Doc's hand. Old friend, you did right by me, by everyone. Don't blame yourself. Damn it, Amos, Doc's voice broke. You stubborn old fool. Couldn't let Caleb take that bullet? Had to play hero one more time. He's my son. Amos's words were getting weaker. All of them, my sons. What father wouldn't? His eyes started to close. No. All 3 brothers shouted together. Dusty pushed through the crowd, whining. The dog pressed against Amos, licking his face, pawing at him. There was desperation in the animal's movements, as if trying to will life back into the dying man. Even the dog knows, May sobbed. Even Dusty knows he's leaving us, but something strange happened. Where Dusty touched Amos, warmth seemed to spread. The old sheriff's eyes fluttered open, clearer than before. Elizabeth? He whispered, staring at the dog. Lizzie, is that you? The dog's tail wagged once, and in his dark eyes something ancient and knowing seemed to shine. "You came back," Amos breathed. "Came back as a dog? To make sure our boys found each other?" Dusty licked his face again, gentle, loving. "I know," Amos said, as if having a conversation only he could hear. "I know, time to let go. But Lizzie, they need me." "Our boys," the dog whined, pressing closer. "What's happening?" Daniel asked, watching in amazement. "I think," Doc paused, examining Amos again. "The bleeding's slowing. His pulse is stronger. How is that possible?" Thomas demanded. "It's not," Doc said firmly. "It shouldn't be. That wound should have killed him in minutes." But Amos's color was returning. His breathing steadied. The brothers watched in stunned silence as their father, who should have been dead, instead seemed to stabilize. "Dusty," Caleb whispered. "The dog that couldn't be saved." "That Amos saved anyway. Now he's returning the favor," Thomas finished. May crossed herself. "It's a miracle. Elizabeth's miracle." For long minutes, no one moved. Doc continued working, but the crisis seemed to be passing. Finally, impossibly, Amos opened his eyes fully. "Well," he rasped. "That was unpleasant." "Pa!" The word came from all three sons simultaneously. "You're alive," Daniel said, wonder in his voice. "Apparently." Amos tried to sit up, gasped in pain. Doc pushed him back down. "Don't move, you fool. You're not out of danger yet. That bullet's still in there, and I still need to operate." "Then operate," Amos said. "But do it at home. Not in this damned barn." They fashioned a stretcher, carried him carefully down. Outside, the aftermath of the battle was evident. Several hired guns lay dead or wounded. Others sat with hands tied, guarded by townspeople. Thomas's ranch hands were collecting weapons, securing horses. Anna Prescott rushed forward. "Is he alive?" Caleb assured her. "Somehow, he's alive." The journey back to town was slow, careful. Amos drifted in and out of consciousness, but each time he woke, his sons were there, all three of them refusing to leave his side. In Doc's office, with proper light and instruments, the surgery began. May, Anna, and several townswomen assisted. The brothers waited outside, pacing, praying, hoping. Hours passed like days. Finally, Doc emerged, exhausted but triumphant. "Got the bullet. Missed the heart by a fraction of an inch. He should recover. Should." Daniel seized on the word. "He's 68, took a bullet, lost blood. His body's been through trauma. But Amos Keene's too stubborn to die," Doc smiled wearily. "He'll recover. Might take months, but he'll recover." Relief flooded through all three brothers. They embraced, strangers a week ago, brothers by blood, family by choice. "We should tell him," Caleb said. "When he wakes. Tell him we're staying. All of us. The inheritance," Daniel started. "We split it 3 ways, like Elizabeth wanted," Thomas said firmly. "Use it to build something together." "I'd like that," Caleb agreed. "A family business. Maybe a ranch or both," Thomas suggested. "I know cattle, you know law." "Daniel, what do you know?" Daniel smiled, the first real smile since the truth came out. "I know horses. Worked the livery long enough. Maybe we could breed them," Thomas finished. "Cattle, horses, land. We could build an empire. A legitimate one," Caleb added with a grin. They were planning, dreaming, when Amos stirred in the other room. All three rushed to his bedside. The old sheriff looked pale, weak, but his eyes were clear. "You boys," he said softly. "Making plans without me?" "Just discussing the future," Thomas said. "Good." Amos's hand reached out, each son taking turns gripping it. "That's good. You'll need each other." "When I'm gone, you're not going anywhere," Daniel interrupted. "We won't let you." "Stubborn," Amos chuckled, then winced. "All 3 of you stubborn as mules." "Must get it from me." "Must get it from Elizabeth," Caleb corrected. "She defied everyone to protect us." "She did." Amos's eyes grew distant. "Loved you boys more than her own life. Made sure you'd survive even if she couldn't." He paused. "Dusty, where's Dusty?" They looked around. The dog was gone. "He was here during surgery," May said, appearing in the doorway. "Sat right by your side. Then when Doc said you'd live, he just walked out." "Find him," Amos said urgently. "We have to find him." Thomas and Daniel searched the streets, while Caleb stayed with Amos. They found Dusty near the cemetery, sitting beside Elizabeth's grave. The dog's breathing was labored, his body trembling. "Something's wrong with him," Daniel said, kneeling beside the animal. Dusty's tail wagged weakly. His eyes, so intelligent and knowing, seemed to be fading. They carried him to Elizabeth's grave, where Amos, against Doctor's orders, had insisted on being brought. May and Doc helped support him as he knelt beside the dog. "You did it," Amos whispered, stroking Dusty's head. "Brought us together, saved me, saved us all." The dog's breathing grew shallower. "Elizabeth," Amos said, understanding flooding through him. "This is her, isn't it? Her spirit, sent back to make things right." Dusty licked his hand once, gentle as a kiss. "Thank you," Amos said, tears streaming. "Thank you for our sons. Thank you for the sacrifice. Thank you for loving me enough to let me go, to protect them even from beyond death." The dog's eyes closed. "Elizabeth," all three sons said together, finally understanding. The impossible dog, the miraculous recovery, the way Dusty had known where every secret was buried. "Goodbye, Lizzie," Amos whispered. "Rest now. Your boys are safe. They're together. It's done." Dusty took one final breath and went still. In that moment, a strange peace settled over the cemetery. The evening breeze picked up, carrying the scent of wildflowers, Elizabeth's favorite. And for just an instant, Amos could have sworn he felt her hand on his shoulder, heard her voice whisper, "Thank you for being the father they needed." They buried Dusty beside Elizabeth's grave. The whole town attended, understanding somehow that this was no ordinary dog, that something miraculous had occurred. "Guardian angel," Pastor Elijah said, delivering words over the grave. "Sent to protect the innocent, to reveal truth, to unite a family torn apart by lies and fear." Elizabeth Pritchard's love transcended death itself as they placed the last stone on Dusty's grave, marking him as Elizabeth's eternal companion. The three brothers stood with their father, arms around each other. "She brought us home," Thomas said softly. "All of us," Caleb agreed. "Together," Daniel finished. Amos looked at his sons, all three of them, standing united at last. The $10 dog had cost him everything and given him more than he'd ever dreamed. "Come on, boys," he said finally. "Let's go home. We've got a future to build." They helped him walk away from the cemetery, leaving behind the past's pain, but carrying forward its love. Behind them, on a stone that would be erected in the coming days, words would be carved. Dusty, guardian angel, faithful friend, Elizabeth's final gift. And in the years to come, people would speak of the miracle dog who'd appeared in Whetstone Creek when a dying sheriff needed hope, who'd revealed secrets buried for 40 years, who'd united a family against all odds. But the Keene brothers would know the truth, that love, real love, never dies. It just finds new ways to protect those it holds dear. 3 months had passed since that fateful night. Autumn had painted Whetstone Creek in shades of amber and crimson, and the town bustled with a vitality it hadn't seen in decades. Amos sat on his porch, exactly where this story had begun, coffee in his hands. His chest still ached sometimes, but Doc Holloway declared him healthier than he'd been in years. "Nothing like getting shot to remind a man he wants to live," the physician had said. The main street had changed. New businesses were opening, a proper hotel, an expanded mercantile, even talk of bringing the railroad through. The Keene Brothers Company was bringing prosperity back to Whetstone Creek. "Morning, Pa." Caleb appeared with fresh coffee. He'd taken to stopping by every morning before his rounds. The word Pa came easier now, though sometimes Amos still caught surprise in his son's eyes. "Morning, son." Amos took the cup. "Town's quiet this morning." "Quiet's good." Caleb settled into Sarah's old chair. "Heard from Thomas yesterday. He and Anna are planning an early spring wedding. About time. Says Daniel's agreed to be his best man. And you?" "Standing up with both of them naturally," Caleb grinned. "Can't play favorites with my brothers." 3 men who'd grown up strangers were building something together, something Elizabeth had dreamed of but never lived to see. "Daniel's doing well with the horse breeding," Caleb continued. "Got buyers from 3 territories interested. Boy's got a gift," Amos agreed. "Always did." Daniel had been the hardest to reach, but slowly, day by day, he'd opened up. The fortune helped. He'd bought the old Pritchard place, turned it into a proper ranch. More than money, though, having brothers who believed in him had worked the real healing. Territorial Marshal sent word, Caleb said. The last of Blackwood's hired guns were sentenced. 5 years hard labor. Justice wasn't always about punishment. Sometimes it was about second chances, something Elizabeth had understood. Hoofbeats drew their attention. Thomas rode up, looking every inch the successful rancher. But when he climbed the porch steps, his embrace for Amos was warm, genuine. Came to drag you to lunch, Thomas announced. May's making pot roast, trying to fatten me up. Trying to make sure you're around for your grandchildren. Thomas grinned. Anna and I were expecting. Come spring, Amos felt his eyes burn. A grandchild? First of many, hopefully. Thomas's joy was evident. Wanted you to be the first to know, they laughed. Amos stood, his sons helping him more from love than necessity. A grandchild, he repeated. Elizabeth would have loved that. She would have loved all of this, Caleb said softly. Seeing us together. Seeing the town thriving. They walked to May's diner together, drawing waves from townspeople. Inside, May had set their usual table. Heard the news, she beamed. About time you boys started giving me grandbabies to spoil. Doc Holloway joined them, then Anna with her son. Daniel arrived last, still shy but smiling. To Elizabeth, Amos said, raising his cup. Who loved us enough to sacrifice everything. To Elizabeth, the brothers echoed. And to Dusty, Daniel added. The best dog that ever lived. To Dusty, they agreed. The conversation flowed, plans for the wedding, the baby, expanding the business. Pastor Elijah stopped by to discuss the new church bell they were donating in Elizabeth's memory. Life was happening. The beautiful, ordinary, miraculous life Elizabeth had wanted for her sons. That evening, as the sun set, Amos found himself at the cemetery. He visited often, talking to the woman he'd loved and lost. Did we do right by you, Lizzie? He asked, kneeling beside her grave. The boys are good men. They're building something special. The breeze picked up, carrying that familiar scent of wildflowers. I know you can hear me, Amos continued. Know you're watching over them still. Thank you for that. Thank you for the dog, for the letters, for loving our boys enough to do the impossible. He placed fresh flowers on both graves, Elizabeth's and Dusty's. Side by side. I'll watch over them too, he promised. Long as I've got breath in me, thunder rumbled, rain coming. Amos turned to go. Pa! Daniel's voice called from the gate. You'll catch your death out here. All 3 sons had come, couldn't let their father walk home alone. They surrounded him, sheltering him. Come on, old man, Thomas teased. May's got pie waiting. They walked together through the first drops of rain, heading toward the warm lights of town, toward family dinners and shared laughter and all the precious moments that make a life worth living. Behind them, on Elizabeth's grave, the flowers swayed in the wind, and if you looked closely, you might have seen a shimmer in the air, like angel wings, like a mother's eternal smile. Like love that conquers even death, Amos Keene had paid $10 for a dying dog and received the world in return. 3 sons, a legacy, a future bright with promise. Sometimes the best things in life really do come when we're both broken and ready to heal. In Whetstone Creek, they'd remember this story for generations. The tale of an old sheriff, a miraculous dog, and 3 brothers united by a mother's love that transcended the grave. Some say it was magic. Some say it was miracle. But Amos knew the truth. It was simply love doing what love does best, saving us all.